Good afternoon. My name is Kevin Greaser. I'm the chairman of the committee Cape Citizens for Reliable Water, which will be a ballot initiative on August the 5th. I'm here with Mayor Stacy Kinder and with our Public Works Director, Casey Brunke, to do a presentation for you viewers on the City of Cape Girardeau's water system. So I'm going to turn it over to Casey, and she's going to give us a presentation on the system.
So we're going to talk a little bit about the City of Cape Girardeau water system. So what are the current issues that we are having with our existing system? We need to upgrade our existing Cape Rock water treatment plants. We need to be able to produce more water there for our city's needs at our main water treatment plant. Our source water has been changing over the years. For those of you that don't know, since 2012, we have been off river water and have been using well water. That well water has been great for about a decade, but over the last couple of years, we have seen the properties of that well water change, which makes the treatment of that water a little bit different. The changes we've seen have been naturally occurring properties that you would typically see in well water. We're just seeing more of them, so we need to treat our water a little bit differently. And we also have an aging distribution system. We have 330 miles of water pipelines in the ground. I'll say that again, 330 miles of pipeline in the ground, just water pipeline. And our system encompasses 30 square miles. So we have a lot of pipe in the ground and a large, robust system. We have done quite a bit of work on our water tanks and some other components in our system over the years, but we're simply to a point where we need to do more. And we need to replace a lot of pipes and concentrate on some of our booster pump stations. Currently on the screen, you see some pictures of our old line feed system. I say old, the new system that you'll see here in just a minute, we've just got installed and we're very excited about it. But the old system that you see on the screen here, you'll see on the left-hand side, that yellow thing there as part of the chute. That is an old street sign holding that chute together. There's just simply nothing left to well to. There in that middle picture, kind of in the middle of the bottom, you'll see some water dripping out of that chute. You'll also notice the corroded holes in that chute there. And then on the right-hand side, you'll see a picture of one of our augers. I think we can all agree that this system is just beyond its useful life. We've done everything we can to keep this thing up and running, but we just simply need a new system. As I mentioned, our old system was a pelletized line system. Here you'll see some pictures of the pelletized line system already out of the building. It looks so much better without that system. This new system that we're getting, the hydrated lime system, is about a $4 million project. The equipment came from Kimco Systems, and Acme Constructors, which is a local contractor, is installing it for us. Here's the new system, very sleek, very modern. As you'll notice, we didn't need a new building to put this infrastructure in. We just needed to simply replace the components of the line system. So the hydrated line system, as you'll see here, is very sleek, very modern, very new technology. It's much more efficient than the pelletized lime system. We can dial in the dosage of the lime that we need to put into our water a lot more effectively and a lot more efficiently. The old system, Alliance Water Resources, who operates and maintains the city's water system, would spend the most man hours, labor, and time maintaining that old system. That was the one thing in our entire water treatment process that they spent the most time on. So they're very excited to have this new system in place and to be able to focus maintenance on some other components.
Casey, do you mind if I interrupt?
Sure.
This system will be proficient or effective into the future.
Absolutely.
For what we're estimating, how many years? Do you have an estimate?
This will probably last us at least 20 years or so into the future.
Okay.
Yes.
And it produces less waste.
It does. So it uses less water to make water. The hydrated lime system, you have to take the pelletized lime, put water with it, make a slurry. This one's just so much more efficient. You don't need as much water to make water. So moving on to another project that the city is currently working on. Here you see a picture of our filter gallery. This is below grade at the water treatment plant. Those yellow beams that you see there, there's maybe 4.5 feet there from the grading to those yellow beams. So it's a pretty confined space. What we had found was that above this is our filter gallery, and we have 14 filters that are fed on the south side of the building. And we noticed that the filters on the north side of the building were not producing as much water as those on the south. So we found a bottleneck within our piping system and have a project to fix that. Here you'll see the red line there going from some of our sedimentation basins, coming out into the water treatment plant yard, and then going back into the building. It's a very simple representation of the project. We basically put a new pipe in from that sedimentation basin to the filter gallery there on the north side of the building to be able to feed those filters more efficiently and have them produce as much water as possible. Here's some pictures of that progress. You'll see there in the middle picture, we had to drill a pretty significant size hole to get our pipe into the building there. That was an interesting day, but luckily all went well. This is about $1 million project, and local contractor Nip Kelly Equipment is the one installing it. I should mention also that the filter gallery project and the lime system project, both of those projects are complete for all intents and purposes at this point in time. We're just working on some punch list items to wrap those projects up. So those projects are pretty much complete. Some of you may have heard earlier this year, you'll see Clarifier 1 there marked out kind of on the left side of your screen. Clarifier 1 went down and we panicked. If that clarifier would have went down, say during the summer months when we had several days of 90 or 100-degree weather, the city would have really been in a pickle. You'll see we have 3 clarifiers there. All 3 of those clarifiers are 100% necessary in the summertime. If one of those goes down, or we have to take it out of service for any reason during the hot summer months, so we cannot produce enough water. We need those 3 clarifiers to meet our city's water demands throughout the hot summer months. Luckily, Clarifier 1 went down at a time when we had some time to spare. We didn't know how much time, but we had a few weeks to spare, and we were able to figure out the problem. So you're looking at the problem here on the screen. You'll see particularly on the right-hand picture, the center pivot of that clarifier just sheared off. There's a spot in there. If you look at the left side picture, you'll see we had to cut away a part of that shaft to get in there to see what was going on. Once we did, we found the problem. We worked with a company out of St. Louis called FabTech to be able to fabricate some parts very quickly. Very excited to work with them. Able to get us the parts super quick, and we got those installed without any disruptions to our citizens, thank goodness. But if that were to happen in, let's say, August timeframe, where that clarifier was down, I think for about a month, we would not be able to produce the amount of water that our city needs.
And we've purchased also a redundant piece to that.
Yes, so as the mayor was saying, we also have purchased or have fabricated a second one of those pieces, that we have one in case another one would ever go down in the future. So here we're going to take kind of a quick tour, an aerial tour of our water treatment plant. Our water is piped from our alluvial wells down along the Mississippi River up 7 miles to our Cape Rock water treatment plant. The first point of contact that raw water sees is in our aeration system here. It just aerates the water to get out some of the naturally occurring properties on well water. From aeration, it goes into the 3 clarifiers. The lime system feeds into those 3 clarifiers. You will see that clarifiers 1 and 2 are kind of a pretty green color, and clarifier 3 is not. With our old hydrated lime system, clarifiers 1 and 2 were lime softened, and clarifier 3 was not. With our new hydrated lime system, it will it will lime feed all 3 of our clarifiers and up to a 4th one, which we'll talk about in a little bit. So we need to update our picture at some point in time to show that all 3 of those clarifiers are the pretty green color, because our new lime system is able to treat all 3 of those. From the clarifiers, the water goes into the blend tank where all the water from the clarifiers blends up nice. And then from there, it heads to one of our 3 settling basins. From the settling basins, it goes into the filter gallery where it's filtered. And we talked about how we're now efficiently using all of our filters into the clear well. There, our water is held in the clear well until it is pumped out into the system for all of our users. So every water user in the city of Cape Girardeau that is on the city of Cape Girardeau system, your water leaves the plant from clear well 1. We talked a little bit about expanding and how the lime system can handle a 4th clarifier. We currently have under design plans to expand the Cape Rock water treatment plant. We've mentioned several times that, and particularly in the summer months, we are barely keeping up with the amount of water that we can produce through our facility. We're getting to a point where, in the next year or 2, we will not be able to produce the amount of water. Our city's water demands have grown over the years, and we need to expand our facility. We're designing a 4th treatment train. So here you see the 4th future clarifier 4 and future settling basin 4. We have room at our current water treatment plant to place both of these, and are currently designing these at the moment. However, we do not have construction dollars to be able to build out this 4th treatment train. This fourth treatment train will take our maximum daily production from just under 8 million gallons a day to around 11.5 million gallons a day. So what have we seen so far in 2025? As of this week, we have seen 16 main breaks. So do the math, that's about one main break every 1.5 weeks. We have had 11 boil water advisories. We've had 39 service line breaks, and we've also seen increased repair costs. One of the questions we get sometimes is, why do we have a higher number of main breaks and not the same amount of boil water advisories? Alliance Water Resources does everything they can to fix water main breaks without having to issue a boil water advisory. A lot of times they're fixing these mains under pressure, if it is safe to do so, and if they're able to do that, we do not have to issue a boil water advisory. A boil water advisory is issued anytime the water pressure dips below 20 psi. Per DNR regulations, we have to issue a boil water advisory if that were to happen. So why do we need to increase our rates? We need to update and expand our plant capacity. So as we mentioned, we need to take our plant from maximum production of 8 million gallons a day to above and beyond. We're currently designing that fourth treatment train that would take us to 11.5 million gallons. We need to be able to build out those components and put those in service. We need to improve our distribution system. We've mentioned we have a very large number of miles of pipe in the ground, and we have a very large system. We need to improve some of our booster pump stations and keep pressures where they need to be throughout the entire city. We need to continue to provide safe, clean, and reliable water. And we need to be able to qualify for grant funding. Currently, our rates are so low, our monthly water rates to our citizens are so low that we do not qualify for some state and federal grant funding. State and federal grant funding want to make sure that the payers into the system have enough skin in the game, and currently our rates are not high enough that they do.
That's known as the affordability index.
Correct.
And in order to qualify for grants, our index needs to be at 1.0.
Yes.
And we are at 0.76, something like that?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Yes.
So that just simply means that the users aren't paying enough into the system to qualify for these grants.
Absolutely correct.
I think you
Yes.
mentioned in a previous presentation that a recent grant would have provided something on the order of $5 million to the city, but we
Correct.
applied and weren't approved because of that
Correct.
affordability.
Yeah, because we do not meet that one AI rating. A lot of times our applications we might still be in the running, but they're pushed to the bottom of the pile because other entities that meet that threshold, they score a lot higher for those grant applications. So here you see on the screen, cities within the state of Missouri with populations greater than 1,000. So you'll see that bottom red box there. Currently, if you use 5,000 gallons a month of water here in the city of Cape Girardeau, you pay $31.43 a month. You'll see that top red box, the Missouri average is $45 a month. The box right below that says November 2024, last November, we had a proposal on the ballot where we had hoped to go to $43.93. Ultimately, that failed. So you'll see that second red box from the bottom. If this proposal come August 5th were to pass, our rates would increase from $31.43 a month to $36.14 a month if you use 5,000 gallons a month. So do the math there. That's $4.71 for 5,000 gallons a month of water in the city of Cape Girardeau. If you use less than 5,000 gallons a month, your bill will go up less than $4.71.
Casey, I think about 70% of our households use less than
Yes.
5,000 gallons.
Yes, we know that a lot of our users do not use the 5,000 gallons a month. So about 70% of our users, their bill would go up less than $4.71 a month.
And Casey, I'll just add, a lot of people are having questions about their bill. And we find ourselves having to remind people, when you get your utility bill from the city of Cape, that is itemized. The total bill is not just water. It includes water, sewer, trash, and other things. So just look specifically at your water bill. And if you add 10%, 15% just to that would be your
The impact of your budget.
impact. Yes.
Okay.
Correct.
So here we break down water rate data just a little bit further. These are cities in the state of Missouri with a population of greater than 20,000. You'll see currently Cape Girardeau is the 6th lowest water rate within the state for cities with population greater than 20,000. If this proposal in August were to pass, you'll see we're kind of right there, just a few notches up, but still in the lower third of cities with greater than populations of 20,000. Here we break it down even one step further. These are cities within the CMO RPC area with populations of greater than 1,000. You'll see currently Cape Girardeau has the third lowest water rate in that region. Only Farmington and Bonne Terre charge lower water rates than the city of Cape Girardeau. If our proposal on August 5th were to pass, we would be the fourth lowest water rate. So here you see on the screen the August 5th ballot language. The city currently has a cap of 5% where we can increase our water rates in any given fiscal year. So what that means is the city council has to vote every year on what to raise our utility rates by. So every year as part of our budget process, our finance director works with our city manager's office and the council to make a recommendation, but ultimately it's up to council on what they want to increase our rates by. So currently we are capped at 5%. And that cap has been in place for many, many, many years. And it's simply just not keeping up with the revenues that we need to improve our system. For many years as well, the 5% cap wasn't enacted. What I mean by that is some years, maybe a 0% increase was given to our customers. Some years, maybe it was 2%, 3%. But historically, it has not been 5% every year, even with that 5% cap. So if this 15% were to pass on August 5th, council would have to vote every year as part of the budget process to increase it anywhere from 0 to 15% as part of the budget process.
Casey, I think Cape is one of the few cities
Yes.
in the state that actually does have a cap. Most cities don't have any upside protection for their citizens, and the city of Cape has chosen to input that into the charter.
That is correct. It is my understanding that the city of Cape Girardeau is one of the few cities in the state that actually imposes a cap on themselves on how much they can increase their utility rates by. I will also point out the ballot language. You will see there that it says there in the second line, prohibits the city from increasing water, sewer, or solid waste collection fees by more than 5% per fiscal year. That 5% does include water, sewer, and solid waste. So the 15% would also apply to those three utilities as well. But we're really focused on the water because that's where our greatest need is.
Well, it could.
It could.
In a
Yes.
year, right?
Yeah, it could. So moving forward, we have to remind ourselves that last November, we did have 7,000 people vote yes for the proposal that we had on the ballot then. We had an amazing amount of folks turn out for that election. So unfortunately, the 7,000 wasn't enough to pass, but we have to remind ourselves that 7,000 people did vote yes in November 2024. We have an amazing, robust committee committed to public education, and thank you to Mr. Grieser for heading up that committee. And we have a proposal coming here on August 5th to potentially increase our 5% cap to 15%. So how much will everything cost? The projects that we've discussed already, the lime system, the filter gallery, and designing of the fourth treatment train at the plant, the city has found $9 million to fund those projects. And that $9 million is funding those. It's spent for all intents and purposes for those three projects that you see there.
When you describe that as found 9 million, it just didn't magically appear. Reserves were reallocated, if
Yes.
I'm correct.
Yes, that is my understanding, that we had to dip into some of our other reserve accounts to fund the 9 million to go ahead and proceed with these critical projects at the facility. So there's not just a bucket of money sitting somewhere else that we could tap into to further expand the plant.
And we'll talk about that a little bit when we describe these funds as enterprise funds.
Yes.
Okay.
We've identified through a third-party consultant who came in and reviewed our entire system. We've identified $56 million over the next 8 years that we would like to put out into the system. 10 million of that would be for expanding the water treatment plant, which would be that fourth treatment train that we've talked about. The majority of that 56 million would go into the distribution system. That would be work on our booster pump stations and on our high priority water mains, creating redundancy in the system. So if we were to have a large water main break, hopefully we would have a redundant main somewhere where we could put some valves, close some valves, open some valves, and still keep water to the majority of the city.
A lot of the distribution lines, I think you've described that have been failing were installed during World War I and World War II.
Yes.
And because of inferior or a different methodology in construction. Explain that.
Yes, so we do have pipes in the ground from the late 1890s, and some folks may think, wow, you haven't replaced those yet. Those pipes are in great shape. They're very thick walled cast iron pipes. I have a section of one in my office. It's in great shape. Most of those are in our downtown area. Anytime we do work down there, if we get near the water main, we'll check it out, make sure it's fine. It is. Most of the time, what we see a lot of our water main breaks, where we see those happening, is in pipes dated from the 1930s, where we saw an amazing war effort happening in our country at that time, where a lot of the higher quality metals went to the war effort and not into pipes that were going into the ground at
And the
that time.
pipes were probably thinner.
Yes.
Because we were, for lack of a better word, skimping, maybe, because of all the materials that were being sent for.
Yes.
Tanks and
Yes.
airplanes.
Yes.
And okay.
Yes, that is my understanding. Beyond the next 8 years, we've identified $64 million that we would put into the distribution system. Again, updating our SCADA system and upgrading our medium and low priority water mains. Again, council, if this 15% increase were to pass come August 5th, council would have to approve every year as part of the budget process anywhere from 0 to 15% to raise the utility rates. So I can't stress enough, just if the 15% passes doesn't mean that it will go up 15% every year from here on out. Council has to vote on that as part of their budget process. As mentioned already, if this were to pass and the 15% increase were enacted, that would be $4.71 a month for 5,000 gallons of usage here within the city of Cape Girardeau. So we've talked about potentially increasing our rates by 15%. Where does that money go? Where does the revenue go from our utilities? They go into enterprise funds. And legally, enterprise funds can only be used for those utilities that they're identified for. They're supposed to operate like a business. So currently, the city of Cape Girardeau on our water system is not charging enough with our rates to operate and maintain the system as it should be. We can't expand the system. We're just simply kind of handcuffed, if you will, because our rates are not sufficient enough to do the things we need to do.
You're almost just putting Band-Aids on the
Correct.
system, right?
Yes.
To describe it more accurately.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we fixed what needs to be fixed, but a lot of that's all kind of a reactive. We'd like to be more proactive, particularly some of these main breaks that we're having, and get some redundancy in the system so that if something were to happen, we wouldn't have a complete citywide outage like we did in 2022. With enterprise funds, operating those utilities like a business, those rates should cover operating and capital costs. The enterprise funds systems that the city currently has are our water, sanitary sewer, and solid waste utilities. And again, I can't stress enough that council has to vote to establish those rates every year as part of the budget process. So again, if the 15% is approved, that doesn't mean that your rate is going to go up 15% every year.
I think this is a good spot to describe a little more detail about enterprise funds. A city-owned system running an enterprise fund, it's not designed to produce a profit.
Correct.
It's designed to cover operating costs and those capital costs that we're projecting to the system.
Yes.
If the system were privatized, the company would be charging rates to cover operating costs, capital costs, and their requirement for a profit margin. The city doesn't have that requirement for the profit margin. So talk a little bit, I think if the system would be privatized, the cap would be eliminated, and it would be typical to see immediate increases of some much larger number to get the system where it needs to be. Am I correct in making that statement?
Yes, I believe so. The city leaders, years and years ago have decided to enact this 5% cap. Now we're asking the voters to potentially increase that. But the voters have a say in that. And they know it can't go up more than, let's say this 15% increase passes, it can't go up more than 15% in any given year. From my understanding from privatized systems, you're exactly right. They're going to charge enough to operate and maintain the system, enough to do capital improvement projects, and then also enough to make a profit. And the city, we don't make a profit on the rates that we're charging. We're simply just charging enough to cover our operating and capital costs to maintain and operate the system.
I did a quick Google search in the last couple of weeks, and I think there are several cities near us that raised their fees in excess of 20% in the last couple of years. And one in particular that raised it, and I think in 2021 and then again in 2023 by 20% each year. So this issue seems to be not uncommon to municipalities across the country.
It's absolutely nationwide. I mean, think about the city, any city, the age of Cape Girardeau. Water distribution and systems are one of the least fun things that a city talks about with its citizens. No offense, Casey. But it's one of the most essential.
Well,
and it's also extremely expensive.
we just looked at transportation trust fund. And, we drive on the streets, we see the condition of the streets, and we all heard, and there was a lot of public input as to where the dollars needed to go. You don't see the water, you just expect to go to your tap and turn it on. You expect to be able to take a shower. You expect clean water instantaneously when you need it. So these upgrades will allow us to continue to deliver on that promise to the citizens of Cape.
Yes. And let me speak to one thing you just mentioned there. I'd say within the past 10 or 12 years, and especially in the past 3 or 4, there have been a number of studies, professionally done studies by companies and individuals who are steeped in this work, who are experts in these various fields that have helped the city produce the plan. In 2022, we had a final report created. It's close to 100 pages thick. If people want to go and read it in public, yes, a lot of big words, but a lot of professional input that examined our water system from tip to tail, from the wells all the way through the system and through the distribution lines. And that has gone into creating the proposal and the financial plan also that we know we need to do and that we're presenting to the public right now. So I do want to take a moment. I always like to try to assure people this isn't just the city council talking and coming up with an idea. This has been many years in the making. And it's really just trying to help educate the public
Thoroughly
as to what the
researched
situation
by professionals that do this for a
Correct.
living.
Correct.
And Casey understands everything that's in that report.
Yep.
So if you would like additional info, I would encourage you to contact any city staff. They can get you to somebody that can answer your questions. I also encourage folks to come and tour our Cape Rock water treatment plant. It is a beautiful facility, very well kept. It was built in the 1930s. It's an amazing facility. And I think it's important for folks to understand where their water comes from. It is quite the process from where we get the raw water from, how we treat it, from where you just turn your faucet on in your home and have clean water. You can go to our city's website and get some more information there, or you can call our Cape Girardeau Public Works office and we'd be happy to talk to you there.
Okay, thank you very much. So perhaps we can talk for just a minute about a couple of maybe common questions that we receive when we're doing presentations to the public. We're embarking on a large number of public presentations about the issue for our voters. We really want voters to be very well informed as to what's being proposed. One of the questions is, why don't we just borrow the money? So Mayor Kinder, maybe you might answer that for us.
Yeah, it's kind of a two-pronged answer. One, about 10 years ago, a little over 10 years ago, we needed a new sewer treatment facility. The city borrowed that money to create that, to bring that new center online, over $50 million, and actually several different tranches of financing were needed for that. To the point where when I got on the council in 2018, our debt load was $130 million. that was viewed to be at a certain point way too high. We have been paying down that debt for the past 5 years very diligently. We still need to reduce our debt load in the city, quite frankly. And so the philosophy is that this is not for the city to go out and borrow another $100 million for any of this. We can't do it. And it's not an appropriate way to manage the city finances. But that brings us to the question of an enterprise fund. We've mentioned it before. The cities, since we own the water treatment system, it is an enterprise fund. And as Casey mentioned before, the money coming into that fund through rates is needed to pay for the fund, just as a business would be run in the private sector. And so in the city, we have several dozen funds. The money coming into those different funds, it can only be used in certain ways. And so in an enterprise fund, the money coming in can only be used for the business of that fund, which in this case is clean water. And so what we're trying to do is run that business, if you will, the best way possible, the most financially efficient way possible, the most responsible way possible. And unfortunately, we do need to raise rates a bit in order to be able to do that.
So my career is in the banking industry, and what I know is, in this case, if the city were to borrow the money, number one, it would have a dramatic impact on our credit rating, which affects interest rates. But in addition to that, these improvements aren't going to happen overnight anyway. And so to that point, to borrow $60 million today, we're not going to spend $60 million today. So it doesn't make sense to borrow and start making debt service payments on 60 million when some of these improvements are going to take place over the next 8 years. So the system itself needs to generate cash flow to be able to provide for these upgrades. And the engineering staff, the public works director here, Casey, you've identified the distribution system that is in the most need of repair and replacement. So you prioritize the system to where you know you're going to go work first.
Yes. And a lot of that data was taken from the studies that the mayor mentioned by our third-party consultants coming in. They analyzed the entire system. We took all that data, and with their help, we have come up with a prioritized list of the work that we need to do in the distribution system.
Let me just add real quickly, with our public works department, with all of our engineers and staff on city staff, along with Alliance Water that we have hired basically to maintain and operate the water treatment facility or system for several decades, I believe 30 plus years. We're very confident that all of those people involved know what needs to be done, know how to run the system well. We're just lacking the financing to do some improvements that we know need to happen now and in the future. And that's what this is really all about.
We have a really good relationship with Alliance Water Resources, right? I mean, I've been in presentations where I've been told they've actually gone above and beyond on many projects, above and beyond what I think our contract with them actually calls for. So they're great partners for us. The aspect, as we discussed earlier, if the city decided to sell the system off, Alliance Water would no longer likely be involved. The other water company would have it, and the limits on rates would likely go away, and there would likely be regular increases for that company to get the system where they perceive it needs to be. And that's going to be no different than what our engineering survey suggested.
Yes.
Yeah.
And we're not making a profit.
And we're not making a profit. Okay.
And that really brings up a frequently asked question by people, and that is, what happens if this doesn't pass in August? what we've just been talking about. Privatization is, I think, what we might consider the nuclear option of all of this. We in the city are not interested right now in selling our system to a private company. All of this is done to prevent that from having to happen. But there are plenty of other consequences too. One is that we know our system isn't getting any younger. It's not going to repair itself. And so we will continue to see a lot of emergency breaks and malfunctions and whatnot happening, which are very costly, and they're also extremely inconvenient, to say the very least. Yes, it's inconvenient for a whole neighborhood or a whole part of town to be under a boil water advisory or order, meaning we don't know if our water is safe for at least 3 or 4 days.
But Mayor,
when you start,
can you imagine being a hospital
well, right,
and,
when you
and
start
not
to
having
figure,
water?
right,
What would they do? They would ship patients elsewhere.
well, and we do know we've had several situations in the past few years where our hospitals, our clinics have been under boil water advisories for 3 or 4 days. Non-essential health care has to be postponed. In 2022, when we had the large water main break, our entire city was under a boil water advisory. Some of our facilities, including one hospital, lost water completely. A lot of emergency water had to be trucked in. Some patients had to leave the hospital. The most essential and critical care patients, remained. But it becomes very scary when you do consider the ramifications on our large systems and our healthcare.
Were the public schools ever impacted with a
Yes.
water outage?
Numerous times.
Numerous times, so the
and
students couldn't go to school?
Some, and I believe that the process is that when one school can't attend school, the whole district shuts down there, and that creates a huge domino effect of then parents can't go to work because maybe they have a 6-year-old and a 10-year-old now at home, those kinds of things. And so there's a tremendous economic impact throughout the whole town.
We're just
when we have
describing
these problems.
These are very practical, real
Right.
consequences
Right.
to a system that needs upgrades
Right.
and repairs.
Right.
I don't think that we're crying wolf, obviously.
No, these are things we've seen in the
These
past,
are
just in the
real
past
things.
few years.
Okay.
And I also want to add, Casey mentioned before, one critical piece of phase 2 that we hope to see happen soon is the addition of the 4th clarifier in our water treatment system. That addresses specifically the capacity issues that we are already seeing in Cape. In our summer months, Casey, you mentioned it before, we are bumping up against the very upper level of our capacity for water. And so if Cape ever intends to grow, if more businesses come here, we're adding hotels online every year. If those things are going to continue, our water capacity is going to need to increase. And so that 4th clarifier becomes a very important piece of it. Imagine this decades down the road, a 5th clarifier would be necessary, and so this is how cities grow, when they have the infrastructure available to provide for, necessary services.
We don't want to paint the picture only that large businesses require a consistent supply of water. I can imagine if I run my own family restaurant someplace in town and I couldn't have water for a week. I don't know that a small business can buy enough bottled water, have water trucked in. So it impacts every citizen in Cape to have a system that is consistent, reliable, predictable. And so that's what our committee is all about, Cape Citizens for Reliable Water. I don't think I have any other questions. Is there any other points to bring up, Mayor Kinder?
We've talked a lot about not wanting to push a panic button on this issue. We're trying to deal with the public in a very sober way, get the facts out to people. but it is important for people to understand the capacity issues that we just mentioned. The fact that, especially in the summer, we are having to talk about some conservation issues with water. The very first things on that list would be to tell folks, hey, we can't water our lawns as much as we'd like to. Tell that to the folks who have just put in, a nice yard, they've got irrigation going. The folks who need to, get water to their pools.
Somebody who wants to wash their car on a regular basis.
Somebody wants to wash their car often. That's a sort. So those are, in the grand scheme, those are little things that would have to start. But as you mentioned, the scarier, more concerning things are how this might impact growth and also health and safety of our community.
We want to remind everybody that this is on the ballot for August 5th in the city of Cape Girardeau. And we also want everybody to be very well informed. You can go to the City of Cape's website, and by all means, if you have questions, contact your representative from your ward. Feel free to call anyone on our committee, and thanks for your time, everybody.
I'd like to thank Casey. Many of our staff are helping get the information out.
Very good.
And Kevin, I'd like to thank you for taking on this task of getting the information out to the public.